glad to have you with us this morning. We are working our way through the book of Genesis, and we're now in Genesis chapter 32. We're studying the Patriarchs, and this is the third and last of the Patriarchs. We're studying the life of Joseph. Joseph's life is really different from the others. If you look at Abraham's life, you see a testimony of faith. You see somebody who was tested, somebody who was not perfect and certainly failed in a lot of ways, but somebody who was so faithful and such a man of faith that the New Testament refers to Abraham as the father of faith. He is the one that we can look to as an example of faith. And then you have Isaac, more uneventful. I mean, the highlight of Isaac's life happened when he was young. When his father took him up on the mountain as his ultimate test of faith. And the great thing about Isaac, even as we talked about him being a type of Christ, that Isaac probably didn't realize at first what was going on, but very quickly had to realize that he was the sacrifice. And at some point, Abraham had to tell Isaac, okay, son, lie down on the altar. Abraham was already way over 100 years old. He couldn't have forced Isaac to do that. Isaac did it willingly. And so it's a beautiful example of the same thing that would happen again on the hills of Moriah when Jesus Christ came to be our sacrifice. Isaac's later life was basically characterized by the fact that he didn't pay attention to what God had already said about who the covenant promises would go to. I mean, God said before his children were ever born that they would go to Jacob. And Isaac just loved Esau. For some reason, you think about Tommy and Dickie Smothers, you were mom's favorite, This is one of those things. These were the original Tommy and Dickie. I mean, Esau could always say to Jacob, you were dad's favorite. But Jacob was mom's favorite. And so we see there that Isaac tried to subvert the will of God but couldn't do it. So now Isaac kind of drops off and the focus is now on Jacob. And we've seen as we've looked at Jacob the last few weeks that Jacob is known for being a trickster, a deceiver, a conniver, one who could talk his way out of anything, one who was always looking to cut the angles. And so what God did, now remember that God's always at work in the lives of these patriarchs. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to make them into people of faith. And so what he did was he put Jacob into the graduate school of faith taught by Professor Laban. He put the only man in the Old Testament who was a bigger conniver, trickster, etc. than Jacob was Laban. And that's who Jacob went to work for. Well, anyway, fast forward 20 years, and now Jacob is on his way out of Laban's country, and he's on his way back home, back to the promised land. There were two problems as Jacob left. The first problem was the fact that his father-in-law was pursuing him. And we know that Laban caught up with him and they had I would call it a come to Jesus if it was the New Testament, but maybe a come to Yahweh kind of meeting there. And they agreed, Laban agreed to let Jacob go. And they even drew like a line in the sand. We talked about last week, like frequently Christians today use we call it the Mizpah blessing. May the Lord watch between you and me when we are absent one from another, etc. That was not a blessing. That was not a benediction. It was a malediction. And that was the fact that we're going to draw a line here, and may God watch to keep you on your side of the line and me on my side of the line. And so they parted. So now Jacob is on his own, and he's on his way back. So we got to look again one more time, perhaps. Probably not one more time. We'll do it again. But let's look at the map of the Holy Land, and we begin here with what you will know as the Sea of Galilee. It has other names. Out of that flows the Jordan River. It flows into the Dead Sea, and there's the Mediterranean Sea over there. Here is Egypt, right down here. Here's the Tigris and Euphrates rivers over here, and so over here is where Jacob has been in Padan Aram. By the way, for whatever it's worth, you notice that Pope Francis is this week in Iraq, and I don't know whether you noticed where Pope Francis was yesterday. He was in Ur. That's the same Ur where Abraham came from. And so he has been back there, and now he's going back, and here's where he's headed, here into the Promised Land. There's a little river that flows into the Jordan River. It's called the Jabbok, and so he's headed back there. Down here is Esau, who lives down in this area here, in what we call Edom. So here's Jacob, and he's headed back. He's dealt with his problem on the backside, which is Laban coming after him. He's dealt with that, but now he's headed to an even bigger problem, because when he left the Promised Land, he left as he did because he knew that Esau wanted to kill him. And Esau had already said to his friends, as soon as Isaac is dead, I'm going to kill my brother. I mean, he cheated me out of the birthright. He stole the blessing from me. He has the major part of the inheritance. He has the family leadership. You know, I'm going to kill him as soon as I can. His mother, Rebecca, said, you need to get out of here. You need a bride anyway. So go back to my brother's house, Laban's house. Get your bride and stay gone until I let you know. I'll send word when Esau cools off. She never sent word. Of course, part of that's because she died during this time. But even before then, Jacob had never heard that everything was okay with Esau. And so if I was, so here he is right here, having left the land of Laban, what we now know as Iraq, and he's headed back. He knows that Esau maybe is waiting to kill him. So if I were to give this chapter a title, I would call it Between Iraq and a Hard Place. I got some laughs locally on that. Okay. But that's where he saw himself at, because he did not know. He knows that Esau is in this area someplace, and he is worried that Esau is waiting to kill him, because that's the last he heard. You're a dead man. And so now that brings us to chapter 32. So if you've got a Bible, wherever you are, if you're at home, pick up a Bible and look with me. We're going to go through, as we have been doing, verse by verse. Verse 1 of chapter 32. Now Jacob went his way, and the angels of God met him. Jacob said when he saw them, "This is God's camp." So he named that place Mahanaim, which means double camp. It means my camp and there's God's camp. You know, there's not much about this. This is such a rich incident, and it doesn't tell us a whole lot about it. But Jacob again is privileged to see angels. So he's on his way there, and at some point he's met with the angels of God, and he sees, I guess God opens his eyes so that he can see the angelic host that is there protecting him. And he says this is God's camp. So it wasn't just like he saw a couple of angels. He saw the company of angels that was with him. It's a lot like the situation with Elijah and his servant when they are surrounded by another Aramean army, and God and Elisha prays, and God opens the eyes of his servant so that he can see. The angels are there. God did not tell angels to come. The angels were there all the time, but he couldn't see them. And now he did. And there's all kinds of stories, lots from the mission fields even today about angels who are protecting them. The famous one that Billy Graham wrote about in his book on angels, about the missionary couple that was endangered by a group of rebel soldiers, and they expected their compound to be attacked, and it never was, and nor the next day, and later on the mercenary or whatever, one of the soldiers was converted to Christianity, and they were talking about that, and he says, "You remember back when you guys surrounded the house, and I thought you were going to kill us that night. We were praying." And he said, "Well, we would have except for the mercenaries you hired." And he said, "What mercenary?" He said, you were surrounded by these big, tough-looking guys, you know. Obviously no one there. That was angels. God sometimes has opened the eyes of his children to see the angelic presence that is around them. And sometimes he does this so that we will realize that we're not alone. Jacob, you remember when he was on his way to meet Laban? He didn't know that's what he was doing, but he was on his way to meet Laban, and he fell asleep, and God opened his eyes in a dream so that he could see this staircase going from heaven to earth, and he saw the angels of God going back and forth on that staircase, what's called Jacob's ladder sometimes, but more like a staircase or a promenade kind of thing, a ramp going from heaven to earth. And Jacob saw. Why did God show him that? Because he wanted him to realize, Jacob, when you look around you, all you see is cactus and rock and nothing. You're by yourself. You're by yourself. You didn't come with a retinue of soldiers. You didn't come with anything. And you don't know where you're going. You don't know what's going to happen to you. But I want you to know heaven is watching. And God's in his heaven. And God's in control. And, right now, when we tend not to see that, it's nonetheless there. If God were to open our spiritual eyes right now, and we could look around, we would probably be amazed at the unseen world that's right around us and what God is doing. Again, God doesn't have a few angels. When the Bible talks about, like in Revelation, 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of thousands, we're probably looking at billions of messengers, of angelic beings of one kind or another. A lot of their job is to protect us and watch over us and minister to us. And so God is showing that to Jacob. And again, he shows it to him here. So much so that he says, this is like two camps. He says, I've got my camp, which was a pretty big one, of him and his servants and wives and kids and camels and donkeys, everything like that. His camp was great. But he said, there is another camp, a camp of angels who are watching over me. So that becomes really important because Jacob's faith is about to be tested significantly. And so God shows him some. Remember how God builds faith. He starts off by revealing some truth. With Jacob, he didn't have a Bible, so it was direct revelation. God told him things, or his eyes were open spiritually so that he could see those angels. So he showed him some truth, but the next day when he got up, he couldn't see the angels. They were still there, but he couldn't see them. And all he could see or hear about was that there is an armed group moving towards you. And it's your brother. And it's the one who said if he ever saw you again, he'd kill you. And he's on his way. Not just your brother, but he's bringing hundreds of soldiers with him. So now, Jacob cannot see the angels anymore. But pretty soon he's going to be able to see his brother. And so the question is, it's easy in verse 1 to see that God's in control and there are angels and I am in his hand and I am protected because I can look out and see it. But when you can't look out and see it anymore, do you still believe it? And that's what the Christian life is all about. Look at verse 2. Then Jacob sent messengers before him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. And again, Jacob is right up here, and he's sending messages down here, and he wants to go ahead and let Esau know he's coming and try to pave the way. Actually, what he didn't know when he was sending messages there was that Esau was on his way. So he said, thus says your servant Jacob, this is what you're to tell Esau. I have sojourned with Laban and have stayed until now. I have oxen and donkeys and flocks and male and female servants, and I have sent to tell my Lord that I may find favor in your sight. Now, why is he kind of bragging about how much he's got? Because he wants Esau to know, I'm not coming for anything of yours. I'm rich in my own right here. Don't worry about me. I haven't come to take anything of yours. I come in peace, and I've got my own family and flocks and all this kind of stuff. Verse 6, the messengers returned to Jacob saying, we came to your brother Esau, and furthermore he is coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him. Why did Esau have 400 men? Well, if Jacob had been your brother and he had done to you what Jacob had done to him, and now he's been gone and you don't know whether Jacob is coming to do more or whether he has his own army or whatever. Yeah, Esau had an army because he didn't know what the intentions of Jacob were. But all Jacob hears is 400 men. And then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. Verse 7. Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. And that can happen pretty easy, can't it? Remember, this is the guy that the night before had been watching angels. He doesn't see angels. All he sees is that my brother's coming with 400 men. And the spiritual growth there, what God is wanting, is God is wanting Jacob to say, Lord, I'm pretty much at his mercy. You know, I've got a lot of people here in sheep, but I can't send my sheep out to fight Esau. I got wives and I've got kids, but they can't fight Esau. I can't fight him. Lord, if Esau wants to kill me, humanly speaking, I'm a sitting duck. But Lord, you've promised me that I will inherit the covenant promised to my grandfather Abraham and to my father Isaac. And you have showed me that you love me, that your angels are there. You showed me before I ever left the land. And you showed me just the other night. I even called it Mahanaim, 2 camps. There's another camp with me. And so, Lord, it looks like I'm just a sitting duck. But I'm not, because you're on my side. That's not exactly what Jacob did. He said instead he was greatly afraid and distressed. And so now remember, Jacob is a thinker. Jacob is a schemer. Jacob is a planner. Jacob is really good at this. So Jacob goes into planning mode. Now there's nothing wrong with planning and doing this kinds of stuff. So what he did was not wrong. The problem is what happened in the first part of that verse. That he did it out of fear, not out of just caution and good business sense or whatever. He did it out of fear. He divided the people who were with him, the flocks and the herds and the camels, into 2 companies. For he said, if Esau comes to the one company and attacks it, then the one which is left will escape. What about those angels? In other words, if Esau kills off half my people, what about that? What about the angels? What about what God had promised him? But again, he's thinking, okay, we're going to divide them in half. And so if half of them get killed, at least I'll be left with half. Jacob said, now, verse 9, comes back to his senses. And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, O Yahweh, who said to me, return to your country and to your relatives, and I will prosper you. Now Jacob snaps back. He begins to show some spiritual maturity. And what he does is he does exactly what God wants him to and what he wants us to do. And that is to pull principles, pull promises from the Word of God. Now, to us, the Word of God is the Bible. To him, the Word of God was what God had told him and what God had told his father. And immediately he reminds God of what he had said. He goes back to God's Word. And he says, O Yahweh who said to me, you said, I love it, you said it. You told me. And you know, why am I here? Because you told me to leave. You told me to get out. And he said, return to your country and your relatives, and I will prosper you. I am unworthy of all the loving kindness and the faithfulness which you have shown to your servant. For with my staff only I crossed this Jordan. Remember when he was at Bethel, the last stop, and when he saw the angelic staircase, what did he have? Remember, his pillow was a rock. I mean, when you are to the place where you're curling up at night and putting your head on just a rock, you know, he said, I only had my staff when I crossed the Jordan. And now, because he came up this way right here, crossed the Jordan, and then went on over here to where Laban was. And he said, when I crossed the Jordan, I had only my staff. And now I have become 2 companies. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him. Okay, that's honesty. That's honesty. He was telling him, Lord, I'm scared to death. I am just scared to death. Dude's got 400 men, and I have nothing. I have no fighting men with me. You know, I'm afraid. I saw your angels and everything like that, but I am afraid. Now that's spiritual maturity. He's getting there. He's beginning to get there now. And he tells God that he's afraid. He says, for I fear him, that he will come and attack me and the mothers with the children. I love it. Again, for you said. Why do we memorize and meditate on the Word of God? Why do we? So that we can then take it back to God and say, you said, I feel so dirty inside. I feel like, that you and I are separated from, I do not sense your prayer. But you said, I will never leave you or forsake you. You said, all my sins were cast on. You said that you see me as the righteousness of God in Christ. You said. And that's exactly what Jacob is doing here. For you said, I will surely prosper you and make your descendants as the sand of the sea, which is too great to be numbered. I mean, you said you were going to bless me, and you said you were going to give me a great family, not that you were going to destroy me or let Esau destroy me. So he spent the night there. Then he selected from what he had with him a present for his brother Esau. 200 female goats and 20 male goats, and 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milking camels and their colts, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. And this is just a little, this man was fabulously wealthy. This was just a little bit. And then he said, and now notice again, you see, Jacob is smart. Jacob now, even though he's trusting God, is still the same smart, administrative-minded thinker that he always was, And so now he's going to send some presents to Esau. And he said, and he gives them to servants. He says, pass on before me and put a space between the droves. So he said, I'm going to send this where I'm going to send a present to Esau, and he's going to go, oh, wow, this is a lot of stuff you're sending me. Well, let's go on to meet Jacob. And then then there's another present coming, and then there's yet another present coming. So he divides them up. He didn't send them all at once, but he divided them up to kind of overwhelm Esau with his generosity and also the fact of his wealth, to let Esau know that if he can afford to give up this much, he's not going to come try to take anything that I have. Verse 17, he commanded the one in front, saying, when my brother Esau meets you and asks you, saying, to whom do you belong, and where are you going, and to whom do these animals in front of you belong? Then you shall say, these belong to your servant Jacob. It is a present sent to my lord Esau. And behold, he is also behind. Notice the phrase. They belong to your servant Jacob. And is sent to my lord Esau. In other words, a term of respect. And behold, he is also behind us. Then he commanded the second and the third to all those who followed the drove, saying, after this manner shall you speak to Esau when you find him. And you shall say, behold, your servant Jacob also is behind us. For he said, I will appease him with a present that goes before me. Then afterward I will see his face, and perhaps he will accept me. So the present passed on before him, while he himself spent the night at the camp. Was this a lack of faith? Or was this just a wise, I'm not sure, really. At this point, had he gone back into, okay, I've got to work this out myself? Or was he just trying to make things up with his brother and trying to show his brother that he was a nice guy now, and that he really wanted to make nice with his brother? Not sure. Wish I knew. But at any rate, he is sending him a lot of stuff at this point. And so he got group number one, little space. Group number two, wait a little longer. Group number three. And remember, these were just the gifts. This was nothing compared to what Jacob had. So where is Jacob at this point? Here's Esau down here. He's up in this area someplace. He's headed to meet Jacob. Jacob has now, this little river right here, which is a fairly short river, which flows into the Jordan. There are all kinds of little streams and everything, just like with any river, that flow into the Jordan River. So the Jordan River empties out of the Sea of Galilee, and it flows southward into the Dead Sea and empties into the Dead Sea. In the meantime, there are little rivers that flow into it. This one right here is the Jabbok, Jabbock, and that's where they are right now. So what Jacob has got to do is he's got to ford the Jabbok River and then move on over here, and assuming he doesn't get killed by Esau, to go ahead and cross the Jordan here, and that will put him in the Promised Land. Verse 22, one of the most famous passages in the Old Testament. Let's read it. And also one of the most confusing. Verse 22, now he arose that same night, and he took his 2 wives and his 2 maids and 11 children and crossed the ford of the Jabbok River. And then he took them, so there was some place there that was known as a place that you could ford the river. And remember, it's not just a few people, wives and kids. I mean, Jacob has literally thousands and thousands of oxen and camels and sheep. And I mean, crossing the river is going to take a long time. So they did that. And he took them, verse 23, and sent them across the stream. And he sent across whatever he had. Verse 24, then Jacob was left alone. Okay, so Jacob stayed back. I'm not sure why. That Bible does not say why. Was it fear? Was it because he wanted to be alone to talk to God? I don't know. But boy, he got all he could have hoped for. So now wives and family are over on the south side. Jacob is stopped here on the north side, and he is waiting. He will cross the river the next day, and something happens. Verse 24, then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. Somebody shows up at his camp. And and sometimes we would wish that, would you tell us a little more about how this happened? Did he say anything? Did you say anything? What happened? How did all this start? And so what happened was that somebody shows up, and however it starts, Jacob and this man end up with like hand-to-hand combat, wrestling and fighting with each other. I sort of see this as kind of a mixed martial arts kind of thing. The amazing thing is that it lasts all night. I don't know whether you've ever been in a wrestling match or whatever or something like that. I mean, you do that for a few minutes and you're tired out. You wrestle for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and I mean, can you even get up? I mean, this is tough. And the fight lasted all night. Again, there's so many questions I've got about this. This is one of the, absolutely, you're going to see how little I know about this passage. But the only thing that makes me feel better is that this week I have spent so much time in commentaries and trying to get insight about what other people think. And I realize they don't know any more about it than I do. That makes me feel better, I mean, people have got some theories and stuff like that, but we don't really know. Where did the man come from? How did he get there? How did he start? Did he walk up and say, hey, dude, let you and me fight, okay? I don't know how this thing started, but it did. And so now we see Jacob, and he is wrestling, fighting, whatever. I mean, just imagine, I mean, obviously it's dark, so it starts sometime after dark, and it goes until daybreak. And so 11 a.m. till 6 a.m., whatever, 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., something like that, maybe 8 p.m., I don't know. It's awfully dark over there. You know, there were no street lights or anything like that. I mean, so I don't know when it started. But the wrestling match, the fighting match continued throughout the evening. And when he saw, that is the man, that he had not prevailed against him, he touched the socket of his thigh. So the socket of Jacob's thigh was dislocated while he wrestled with it. Now you know, because you've read this before, you know that this is perhaps an angelic being. I don't believe so. I believe he was wrestling with the pre-incarnate Christ. I believe this is a theophany. This is Jesus. And it's from something he says in just a minute, so we'll get to that point. But there are several times in the Old Testament when the second person of the Trinity appears in some sort of human form that people can relate to, to people. And we see it several times in the book of Genesis. And of course the question that you got to ask is, okay, if this is happening, how can Jacob hang in there with God? I mean, he is wrestling God. I mean, why did this continue? You know? And I've thought about that. All I could think about, I have no answer. I just have a story. If I don't have answers, I have stories. So, you know, but if you've ever been a father and had a boy, you know that there were times when you wrestled. It's just what you do. I mean, sometimes as a father, you just go in and you fall on the kid's bed, or fall on your son's bed, and it's just like, okay, it's on, bro, you know, and you wrestle, you know. And like, that's something that women really miss. You know, can you imagine a woman going in and falling on her daughter's bed and saying, I'm coming for you? You know, I mean, it just doesn't happen with women. It's something that little girls grow up and they never get a chance to experience. You never get a chance to experience being in your bed and opening one eye and all of a sudden seeing your dad pouncing on you, you know, and you're wrestling. Now, when you wrestle with your kid, you wrestle back and forth. Is that because, you know, as a father, that, you know, that you can't take care? I mean, there'll be times when, you know, your son will roll you over and your son's got you pinned and everything like that. Is that because you can't get up? No. At any point, you could end this. But, again, the experience of the wrestling is what you're going for. And you let your son win some. And sometimes you let him get him. And I can remember Josh pinning me back and, I can't get up. I can't get up. Well, all I had to do was push him off. You know, I can't get up, Josh. I can't get up. That's what was going on, I think. He was wrestling with God. And God wanted Jacob to come to a place of giving in. That's been always what he wanted. We sing it, I surrender all. All to Jesus. I surrender. I surrender all. That's what God wanted to bring Jacob to. And he actually, I don't know why he chose this. I have no idea. I mean, you know, you ask me a question, I can't answer it. All I know is what I read here. But I know that they wrestled, that you see the power of God when God finally, you know, at some point, just like when you're wrestling with your kid, if you're a dad, when you're wrestling with your kid and you hear a TV show come on downstairs, you want to live, okay, all of a sudden, bam, and it's over, you know. And that's what That's what happened with Jacob's wrestler. I mean, at one point he finally just touched him in the thigh and just disabled him. That's all it took. But until then, it was on, the wrestling match. Let's read what happened. When he saw that he had not prevailed against him, he touched the socket of his thigh. So the socket of Jacob's thigh was dislocated. Ugh. You know? He knocked his femur out of its socket. That had to hurt. You know? And so he said the socket of his thigh was dislocated while he wrestled with him. And then he said, "Let me go, for the dawn is breaking." Then he, the heavenly wrestler, said, "Let me go, for the dawn is breaking." But he said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And that is exactly what God wanted to hear. But he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." He said, "My name is Deceiver. My name is Heel Catcher. My name is Supplanter." You know. And he said, "I'll give you a new name." And he said, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, he who strives with God." For you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. In other words, you have endured. You have hung on. And Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." Jacob already knew. But he said, "Why do you ask my name? You already know who I am." And he blessed him there. So Jacob named the place Peniel, for he said, "I have seen God face to face." That means the face of God. "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been preserved." Notice that. I have seen God face to face. Not I have wrestled with an angel. Why do I believe that this was God? This was a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus? Because he said, "I have seen God." Not I have wrestled with an angel. Not there has been a divine being. I mean, he had just seen angels in the first part of this chapter. He knew about angels, you know. But now he said, "I have seen God face to face." Now we know now literally this was not face to face. This was a manifestation of God that he saw. A form that God took on so that he could present himself today to Jacob. But he said, "I have seen God face to face, and my life has been preserved." Now the sun rose upon him as he crossed over Peniel, and he was limping on his thigh. Therefore to this day the sons of Israel do not eat the sinew of the hip which is on the socket of the thigh, because he touched the socket of Jacob's thigh in the sinew of the hip. And so here's the man who goes to bed afraid, and he has this encounter with God and gives. He gives in. You know, and God blesses him and says, "Okay, I'm going to give you a new name." And now that's where the name Israel comes from. And he said, "This is your new name. You have been known as Deceiver. And now you're going to be known as one who strives with God." Pretty cool. Next page. Next chapter. Genesis 33. Now this will go pretty quickly because this is a story about when Jacob actually meets up with Esau and what happens. And so we're just going to kind of run through this. It's one of those, we said that one of the part of Genesis is just history of the patriarchs, what was going on in those days. This is what happened when they met. Verse 1, then Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau was coming, and 400 men with him. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the two maids. And I love the way he divided them up here. And he put the maids and their children in front, and Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph last. In other words, he's saying, in case anything happens, I'm arranging my family in the order of their dearness to me, you know. So I'll put the maids that are sort of like my wife/concubines. I'll put them and their kids next, and then I'll put Leah, and then I'll put Rachel and Joseph in the end. And Leah's going, well, thank you, husband, you know, because they realized, I'm sure, what was going on. Remember that spiritual growth is a gradual thing. I mean, even if you have met and wrestled with God, you don't just wake up and all of a sudden all of your thinking processes are changed. I mean, that is the thing that you grow into as you obey God and believe God. Verse 4, then Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. He lifted his eyes and saw the women and children and said, who are these with you? And so he said, the children whom God has graciously given your servant. Then the maids came near with their children, and they bowed down. Leah likewise came near with her children, and they bowed down. And afterwards Joseph came with Rachel, and they bowed down. And he said, what do you mean by all this company which I have met? And he said, to find favor in the sight of my Lord. But Esau said, I have plenty, my brother. Let what you have be your own. But Jacob said, no, please, if I have found favor in your sight, then take my present from my hand. For I see your face as one sees the face of God, and you have received me favorably. Please take my gift which has been brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have plenty. And then he urged him, and he took it. In the ancient Near East, it was an insult not to take a gift from a friend. And so they go through this little kabuki dance here. I've got this gift. No, I'm not going to take it. Please take my gift. No, I'm not going to. You know. And so finally, they give it. He gives in, and he takes his gift. Then Esau said, "Let us take our journey and go, and I will go with you." And so Esau says at this point, "Okay, let's go together." You know, and I'll lead the way with my soldiers and everything like that, and then we'll proceed on together. Verse 13, but he, Jacob, said to him, Esau, my Lord knows that the children are frail, and the flocks and herds which are nursing are a care to me. And if they are driven hard one day, all the flocks will die. Please let my Lord pass on before his servant, and I will proceed at my leisure, according to the pace of the cattle that are before me, and according to the pace of the children, until I come to my Lord at Seir. Mount Seir is where Esau lived. And so he said, you go ahead, I'll come behind you, and then we'll meet up there. Jacob never did that. I mean, Jacob, I know that everything is good, but I'm sure Jacob is thinking, what if, is this really real? What if he tries to lure me into something and he gets me on down there and then he turns on me or whatever? And Jacob just wanted to be sure. So he said, and you've probably done the same thing. You go ahead, I'm coming. But you never went. And so later on, they did get together. I mean, they lived peaceably with each other. But at this point, Jacob is not willing to chance everything. So he says, "You go ahead, and I'll see you later on." Esau said, please let me leave you with some of the people who are with me. I'll leave you kind of like an armed guard or whatever, and they'll go with you. But Jacob said, what need is there? Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord. So Esau returned that day on his way to Seir, and Jacob journeyed to Succoth and built a house for himself and made booths for his livestock, and the place is named Succoth. Now Jacob came to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, and he came from Paddan Aram and camped before the city. He bought the piece of land where he had pitched his tent from the hand of the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. And then he erected an altar and called it El Elohe Israel, which is God is the God of Israel. So what is going on here? So he gets down to Jabbok here. He crosses the Jabbok, and then they cross the Jordan River. Did not go on down here where Esau was. He goes on into the promised land. And they end up at a city called Shechem, which was a Canaanite city. Jacob did something that his father Abraham, his grandfather Abraham, and his father Isaac had never done. He bought land. Not sure he should have done that. At least not where he did it. What he did was he settled down next to the Canaanites. He bought land here, and you will see in the next chapter exactly what happens in the relationship there with those people in the land. It really turns ugly pretty quickly. This, by the way, but this was his first headquarters there. Near Shechem, is what's called Jacob's Well, at a place really right next to it called Sychar. And even today, as one of the places in the Holy Land, which there is no question about, is this really what happened here, is Jacob's Well. And so Jacob's Well is here at Sychar, and it shows up. It's not even mentioned in the Old Testament, but it's mentioned in the New Testament, because Jesus is headed from down here in the south in the Jerusalem area up here to Galilee, and instead of crossing the Jordan, he goes right through this area, which had come to be called Samaria. And there by Jacob's Well, he stops and has an encounter with a woman. It's called the Woman at the Well story. That was Jacob's Well, the well which was here, which he put down right here. I don't think Jacob should have settled there. I don't think he should have bought the land. One thing he did was he did erect an altar, but I think God is more interested in obedience than sacrifice. At least that's what the Old Testament tells us. So Jacob's just like me, and he's just like you. There are times when he listens to God and he does what God says, and there are times when he forgets what God has told him and goes off on his own. There are times when you look at Jacob and you go, here is a man of God that God is using, and here is a man who has seen God face to face and has conversed with angels. Here is a man who grabs the promises of God and says, but you said this, God. I'm going to be okay because you said it. That's great. And then there are times when Jacob just forgets all that and goes off on his own, just like us. Just like us. And the main thing is that in all this, we tend to say, how ill me after what I have done. How could he hang with Jacob? after what he had done. Because when God has called you and God has blessed you and God has given you promises, God says, okay, you blew it. You're forgiven. I'm still going to do what I told you I would do. Jacob should be a real encouragement for all of us. Let's bow our heads. Father, thank you so much for your revelation about these people, Lord, that it's just amazing when we look at them and we see there are times when we just stand back in amazement at what you did with them and how they were blessed. And then there are times when we look at them and we say, how could you have stuck with them in all of this? And yet you did. And you're showing us that you love us and that we're in your hands no matter what. And you will bless us. Lord, help us to remember, like Jacob, to take your word and to claim it. And when we're in doubt or when we're in fear, to claim what you have told us. Help us to hide your word away in our hearts. Lord, thank you so much for these people who are here this morning and these people who are scattered throughout this video audience. And I just pray that you will bless the time that we're about to have in your word with our pastor. Lord, speak to us today. Lord, we love you, and we thank you that you have not only loved us, but you've told us in ways that we can claim and read back to you, because you said that that's what you wanted us to do. Bless this time as we go into our worship service in a few minutes. Bless those who are at home sitting with us today. In Jesus' name, amen.